Monday, February 28th, 5:30 PM, special board meeting of the Webster Town Board is come to order. Let's say this Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dolly, could you do roll call? Thank you.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Here.
Councilman Abbott?
Here.
Councilwoman Wynn?
Here.
Attorney Genesi?
Present.
Okay. All right, well, the first order of business is a public hearing to consider enacting a local law to grant tax exemptions, real estate tax exemption status for volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance personnel. So I'm going to open that public hearing. Now, there is nobody in the room, I shouldn't say that. Our esteemed assessor, Donna Komar, is here. Not so much probably to get on the podium, but to answer any questions if the board has any about this. So I am going to assume that there is nobody here from the public to comment on this proposed local law for or against. It was published in the Webster Herald in last Wednesday's edition, February 23rd. And I think it was also on our social media platforms and on our website. Karen Buck did tell me and handed me when I came in, we had one comment that came through for the public hearing from our portal where citizens can submit in writing if they're not going to be able to show up. And this was from Dorothy Fate at 742 Hightower Way. And Dorothy's comments are, I wanted to express my support for a property tax reduction for volunteer firefighters. However, since the town of Webster does not have a volunteer ambulance company, I am opposed to including ambulance personnel without the wording clearly indicating that the proposal covers volunteer ambulance personnel only. This could cover the future possibility that Webster has a volunteer ambulance with unsalaried personnel in the future. And that is Dorothy Fate's comment. And a good one, may I add. If there is nobody else to have a public comment on this, I'm inclined to close out the public hearing. If you'd like, sure. Sure. So going up to the podium is our Webster Town Assessor, Donna Komar.
Hello. So just to clarify for you and to satisfy Ms. Bates' question, the real property tax law does include the word voluntary in front of the word ambulance service workers. So it is specified in the law of New York State. If it wasn't in our exact law, the state law would trump it anyway, would it not, Mr. Genesi?
Yeah. Yes.
So
Yeah.
yes, I think it's already clarified.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been a lot of questions on it. So it's a good thing that we clarify it and also in the wording of the proposal or the resolution. So I am going to close the public hearing. With that, I would like to make a motion. This resolution, local law number 1, correct, Charlie?
Yes, it is this year.
22.
Yes.
Of the Webster Town Board enacting a local law to extend certain tax exemptions to volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance personnel, amending Chapter 199 of the Webster Town Code. At a special meeting of the Webster Town Board on February 28, 2022, Supervisor Flaherty, Councilman Abbott, and Councilwoman Wynn were present. This resolution is offered by the town supervisor for its adoption. Whereas the town board has the authority pursuant to Article 2 of the New York State Municipal Home rule law to adopt and amend local laws consistent with the New York State Constitution and general state laws in relation to their property, affairs, or government, and in relation to the powers, duties, qualifications, number, and other terms and conditions of the employment of their officers and employees, and whereas the town board has the authority granted to local taxing jurisdictions by real property tax law, section 466-K, tax exemption for volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance personnel, and whereas it is in the interest of the town to expand the pool of applicants for the important positions of volunteer fire and volunteer ambulance service workers within the town, and to enhance the ability to recruit and retain the volunteers that are the lifeblood of the volunteer fire and volunteer ambulance organizations currently serving the residents of the town of Webster. And whereas it is both in the public interest and required by law that a public hearing be held to consider this amendment in addition to the Code of the Town of Webster, Chapter 199, and whereas a notice of public hearing was published in the Webster Herald on February 23, 2022, and posted on the town bulletin board at 1000 Ridge Road in Webster and the town's website, and whereas the public hearing and the proposed new local law was held by the Webster Town Board on February 28, 2022 at 5:30 p.m., and all interested persons having an opportunity to be heard at the public hearing, and whereas a short form environmental assessment form, EAF, for the proposed action has been prepared and has been submitted to the town board and reviewed by the town board, and whereas it is in the public interest to enact the aforesaid local law, now therefore be it resolved that the town board hereby determines that based upon the information in the EAF and other available information, the proposed action is designated a Type 2 action under the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEQR, as it will not have a significant effect on the environment within the meaning of SEQR, and involves official acts of ministerial nature involving no exercise of discretion and routine or continuing agency administration and management, does not require the preparation of an environmental impact statement, and therefore no further review under the New York Environmental Conservation Law, Article 8 is necessary. That such local law to be designated as Local Law Number 1 of 2022, be it enacted by the Town Board of the Town of Webster, New York, as follows. The article entitled A Local Law to Extend Certain Tax Exemptions to Volunteer Firefighters and Volunteer Ambulance Personnel, amending Chapter 199 of the Webster Town Code. Section 1, title, This local law shall be a new article under Chapter 199 of the Code of the Town of Webster entitled Tax Exemption for Volunteer Firefighters and Volunteer Ambulance Personnel. Section 2, Purpose and Findings. It is the purpose of this local law to implement the authority granted to the local taxing jurisdictions by real property tax law, section 466K, tax exemption for volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance personnel. The town board of the town of Webster finds and hereby determines that the New York real property tax law 466K makes available a tax exemption for future fire and ambulance service workers at the option of the local municipality. The town board further finds and determines the town of Webster should exercise said option and implement said tax exemption because it would enhance the ability to recruit and retain the volunteers that are the lifeblood of the volunteer fire and ambulance organizations currently serving the residents of the town of Webster. Recruiting and retaining sufficient volunteers to serve these important functions is essential to maintaining the high quality of emergency service in our community and saving its taxpayers the significant expense of paid staff. Section 3, grants of property tax exemption for volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance personnel. Chapter 199 of the Code of the Town of Webster, taxation, shall be amended to add Article 12, tax exemption for volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance personnel as follows. Article 12, tax exemption for volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance personnel. 199-43, legislative intent. The real property tax law has been amended by the addition of the new 46-K, which permits the town of Webster to grant a partial tax exemption on real property owned by an enrolled member of an incorporated volunteer fire company, fire department, or incorporated voluntary ambulance service, or such enrolled member and spouse. Said partial exemption is 10% of the assessed value of such property for all town purposes. 199-44, grant of exemption. An exemption of 10% of assessed value of the property owned by the enrolled member or such enrolled member and spouse is hereby granted from taxation with respect to all town purposes, subject to the requirements set forth in this article. 199-45, eligibility. Such exemption shall be granted to an enrolled member of an incorporated volunteer fire company, fire department, or incorporated volunteer ambulance service, provided that A, the applicant resides in the town of Webster, which is served by such incorporated volunteer fire company or fire department or incorporated volunteer ambulance service. B, the property is a primary resident of the applicant. C, the property is used exclusively for residential purposes, provided, however, that in the event any portion of such property is not used exclusively for the applicant's residence, but is used for other purposes, such portion shall be subject to taxation, and the remaining portion only shall be entitled to the exemption provided by this section. D, the applicant has been certified in accordance with 199-49 as an enrolled member of a 1 incorporated volunteer fire company or fire department for at least 2 years, or 2 incorporated volunteer ambulance service for at least 2 years, and E, the applicant complies with the requirements of 199-47. 199-46, grant of lifetime exemption. Any enrolled member of an incorporated volunteer fire company, fire department, or incorporated voluntary ambulance service who accrues more than 20 years of active service and is so certified by the authority having jurisdiction for the incorporated volunteer fire company, fire department, or incorporated voluntary ambulance service shall be granted the 10% exemption as authorized by this article for the remainder of his or her life as long as his or her primary residence is located within Monroe County. 199-47, application. Application for such exemption shall be filed with the assessor for the municipality in which the property is located on or before the taxable status date on a form as prescribed by the Commissioner of Tax and Finance. 199-48, no diminution. Wow, of benefits. Thank you, Charlie. It must be Latin, right? Sure. No applicant who is a volunteer firefighter or volunteer ambulance personnel who by reason of such status is receiving any benefit under the provisions of Article 4 of the property tax law and the effective date of this article shall suffer any diminution of such benefit because of the provisions of this article. 149-49, certification. Each incorporated volunteer fire company, incorporated volunteer fire department, and incorporated voluntary ambulance service shall file a notice annually with the assessor, certifying its enrolled members with 2 or more years of service per procedures prescribed by the assessor. Section 4, severability. If any clause, sentence, paragraph, subdivision, section, or part of this law or the application thereof to any person, individual, corporation, firm, partnership, entity, or circumstance shall be adjudged by any court of competent jurisdiction to be invalid or unconstitutional, such order or judgment shall not affect, impair, or invalidate the remainder thereof, but shall be confined in its operation to the clause, sentence, paragraph, and subdivision section part of this law, or in its application to the person, individual, corporation, firm, partnership, entity, or circumstance directly involved in the controversy in which such order or judgment shall be rendered. Section 5, effective date. This local law shall take effect upon the filing with the Secretary of State. The town clerk is hereby authorized and directed to take such action as may be necessary to carry this resolution into effect. That is my motion.
Second.
Supervisor Flaherty?
Aye.
Councilman Abbott?
Aye.
Councilwoman Wynn?
Aye.
I gotta take a drink of water. That was a lot of, wow. I want to just say that, for anybody that watches this tape in the future, I tried to emphasize, especially on the ambulance personnel, volunteers. Because the reality is, on February 28th, 2022, when we are holding this board meeting, there essentially is no volunteers in the ambulance field in the town of Webster. Since West Webster Fire got out of the ambulance business back at the end of 2021, they are strictly now a volunteer firefighting organization. The town has contracted with, through their certificate of need for ambulance, for emergency medical technicians, EMTs, and for paramedics, with NEQALs and WEMS. And to the best of my knowledge, that organization, a 501c3 non-for-profit, all of their EMTs and paramedics are paid. So I think that's a very important clarification that right now, at least the landscape of the town of Webster, there is no voluntary ambulance personnel, to the best of my knowledge. Is that the way you understand it, Bill?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Jenny?
Yes.
Okay. Donna? All right. So that's it. And I will just say before I close out this meeting, on a lighter note, I guess, for anybody watching that's interested, congratulations to the Webster Thomas hockey team, who won the Section 5 championship yesterday and will be representing Section 5 in the state hockey playoffs. I think they play Saturday, March 5th at Brockport at the Tuttle Arena. So anybody watching, go out and support the Webster Thomas hockey team. I think that's a pretty big...
Was somebody supposed to dye their hair blonde?
I don't really want to talk about...
Okay.
Well, it worked out to my advantage, Charlie, although I will say this, my worst nightmare was my kids' school is in the sectional finals against Webster Thomas, the school where I am the town supervisor. So I was in that game yesterday, and I had to walk sheepishly past the Thomas parents who were like, Flaherty. But it all worked. So with that, this meeting is concluded.
Okay.